Hello, everybody, and welcome to the August numbers bankruptcy nerd alert. I am going to share my lovely numbers screen up here and talk about all the bankruptcy nerdy things that you could possibly imagine on my Thursday morning. So let's jump in to bankruptcy nerd alerts. So my name is Jen Lee. I am a bankruptcy attorney who really enjoys being nerdy about bankruptcy. And every month I do a bankruptcy nerd alert with the August or with the numbers from the previous month's filings. And then occasionally I will add in quarterly, annual, and also there are one-offs that I talk about the credit, debt, whatever numbers are coming out. And so this is going to be specifically about bankruptcy numbers. There will be one probably later next week on some of the debt and credit and default rates that are going on. So stay tuned for those kinds of things. So jumping right into the August numbers, which were just released. And just as a reminder, I do teach bankruptcy from start to finish to lawyers who want to add it. It's an online self-paced course. You also get live access to seminars and also mentoring from a bankruptcy nerd. So numbers, commercial chapter 11s. And the way I compare numbers is year over year, because there are certain cycles that happen in the year that make year over year probably more predictable than month over month from like July to August. So August 2024 to August 2025, there was a 0.5% decrease in commercial chapter 11s that were filed. However, interestingly enough, subchapter 5, which if you're not familiar with chapter 11s, there is a subchapter of chapter 11 that is intended for a small business owner. And it was enacted in February of 2020. It has a very interesting timing background, because if you remember what was happening in February of 2020, we were getting ready to, we didn't know it at the time, but COVID was just about to hit and shut down a lot of things. So subchapter 5's year over year actually had a 17% increase. And what this says to me, because you get my opinions on this and what the trends are in the market is doing, what this says to me is that small business subchapter 5, small businesses are really struggling. And we're seeing that month after month in the increases in subchapter 5. Now, I wouldn't compare subchapter 5 now to back in 2020, because everything was kind of paused for a long time. And so now I think what we're seeing is a lot of restaurants, a lot of service businesses, things that rely on food prices and supply prices. That's what we're seeing as the cause for some of the bankruptcy filings, because it can't keep up with debt service and that kind of thing. So that was commercial chapter 11s and subchapter 5. Consumer chapter 7, which is getting more into my bailiwick. I like to follow the big chapter 11s, but as a expert, consumer and small business is where I like to play the most. Consumer chapter 7's year over year, there was a 10% increase. And so this trend has been ongoing for the last couple of years, where it's just increasing at this point. A slightly lower increase than July. July was, I believe, 17. I don't have it in front of me right now. It was a slightly smaller increase, but a 10% increase is still pretty significant year over year. And this also reflects the filing cycle, especially for consumer debtors. If you've ever heard me talk on cycles, it's very predictable when filings will pick up because of life. And a lot of times summer tends to be a little bit slower. August does tend to be a little bit slower. So the fact that it was an increase year over year is interesting. Usually it picks back up in September, October, and November before Thanksgiving, because when school goes back into session, people start working on some of those issues. They don't tend to do it in the summer. The psychology of bankruptcy is a whole other fun topic. Chapter 13 was a very slight increase, was only a 1% increase. And chapter 13s are a smaller portion of bankruptcy filings. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the wage, or they're called a wage earner plan. You have to have regular income. It's a reorganization plan for Chapter 13. And so a lot of times when wages or employment is not as stable, Chapter 13s are kind of the first thing to slow down a little bit. I don't think it's slowing down. It was still an increase, but it also is difficult to plan sometimes with economic uncertainties. So total individual filings from August 2024 to August 2025 was a 7% increase. And so in that number, because I'm a big fan of telling people you can make numbers say whatever you want. You may have like an 80% increase one month, and it was all due to one gigantic case that had a whole bunch of related cases. The 7% increase tells me that we had Chapter 7s were at a 10% and Chapter 13s were at a 1%. That kind of gives you an indication of the number of cases because the weighted total was 7%. So Chapter 7s do tend to be 75% or more of consumer filings. So 7% increase overall for individual filings. I'm hearing that from a lot of bankruptcy attorneys. I'm seeing that with calls coming through to the bankruptcy firms that I work with, to other organizations that help people in bankruptcy or with finances. Most of them are booked out at least a couple of weeks now before they can fit somebody in unless it's an emergency. So the calls are definitely picking up. Total filings. August to August was a 6% increase. And so again, if you look at the commercial filings being a small decrease, with subchapter 5 being an increase, all of that weighs into a 6% increase overall, which is really close to what the individual consumer filing was. And the reason for that, if we're just looking at pure numbers or the number of filings, there are a lot fewer commercial bankruptcies that get filed, significantly fewer, like hundreds usually to maybe a couple thousand per month, whereas on the individual side you'll see 40, 50,000. So that's why the difference is there. And when you start looking at weighted averages, the 6% increase includes all bankruptcy filings. I wanted to put a plug out there. ABI has a webinar next Friday, September 12th. It's on their website talking about navigating the current trends in bankruptcy filings. If you're an ABI member, I registered for it, and ABI also partners with Epic and AACER to come up with these stats and put them out. And they did a press release. And so I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to attribute this to Michael Hunter, who is the vice president at Epic. He said, as anticipated, bankruptcy filing volumes continue to climb, even as GDP grows growth and unemployment remains relatively stable. Notably, we are witnessing the longest sustained increase in total open case inventory since 2008. And that's an indicator of shifting financial pressures. I'm not going to read the rest of you, but he expects the upward trend to continue. So the reason why I put this quote in here is because I am a big fan of looking at early indicators and trends. If you've ever followed anything I talk about with bankruptcy, bankruptcy attorneys are kind of the canary in the coal mine. Sometimes we see that stress long before the bankruptcy filings happen. And those of us who have been around and practicing the last couple of years have definitely seen the calls picking up and that pressure hitting. And I think with economic uncertainty. So if you are answering client questions about bankruptcy, or you are looking at trends in financial stress, pay attention to what bankruptcy attorneys say is going on. I appreciate the Epic and how they put together these stats, very informative. Again, the press release came out, I think it came out this morning, but they had released information yesterday. And the webinar for ABI is next Friday, and it is called Navigating Trends in Bankruptcy Filings. So if you want a much more thorough analysis than not my bankruptcy nerd off the cuff discussion, definitely check out ABI's webinar next week. Finally, just as a reminder, I love to talk about bankruptcy. In case you couldn't tell, I love to talk about bankruptcy. if you are looking at adding bankruptcy as a practice area, or you're looking at revamping your systems as a bankruptcy attorney, give me a call. Actually, don't call me. I don't really like phone calls, but reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me, because I am happy to teach people how to do bankruptcy correctly and mentor through first cases and talk through how to actually practically add bankruptcy as a practice area. So stay tuned for more bankruptcy alerts. I will have September numbers early in October. Watch out for that live stream. And then also later this month, I will do an update quick on debt credit and late payments and default rates and things like that. If you have questions, reach out. I look forward to seeing everybody soon. And I will then